So today's recipe is asparagus, peas, and pasta. Let's get started. First, let's lay out our ingredients. So we have 2 cups of whole grain pasta. We have a bunch of asparagus, maybe about half a pound. We have 2 cups or about half a pound of frozen peas. We have 1 cup of Parmesan cheese, grated or shredded, just some way that melts pretty easy. And then we have 2 teaspoons each of dried basil and oregano. I'm also going to add a little bit of garlic, and I can teach you a cool way to add that later. Here, I'm rinsing my frozen peas. The warm water is actually going to help the peas thaw a little bit. Next, I'm giving a good rinse to all the asparagus. And then I'm going to wrap it up in a dry paper towel so they can dry off. Finally, I'm also giving my pasta a rinse. Sometimes boxed pasta can have a little bit extra starch on it, which makes it clump up in the pot. So next, we have to fill our pots with water. I'm filling 2 pots here. The first is going to be for my pasta, and the second one is going to be for my asparagus and peas. Now let's get the pots on the stove and get them boiling. Turn your heat up to high. In the pasta water, drop a couple of sprinkles of salt. This helps flavor the pasta while it cooks. While we wait for the water to boil, let's get working on our asparagus. So, asparagus can sometimes have pretty tough bottoms, so if you feel up your asparagus, you'll find out where the bottom gets tough, and you can snap or cut that right off. So when I'm cutting asparagus, what I like to do is line up a bunch of them in a bundle, and then cut them on the bias. On the bias means on an angle, so you can do that by slightly tilting your knife blade away from your fingertips. Like many spring vegetables, asparagus is pretty vulnerable to spoilage, so it's best eaten right away if you can. If not, you can wrap a damp paper towel over your asparagus and store it in the fridge. Also, asparagus is high in antioxidants and prebiotic fiber, which is great for your gut health. Now let's look at our asparagus. You'll see that all of these pieces were cut to about 1 inch in size. That way they all cook evenly and quickly. So let's work on garlic. If you'll notice, there's a papery skin on the outside. The best way to get rid of that is by taking the back end of your knife and smashing the garlic. This will make it easier to get off. Then we want to mince our garlic. This can be hard because garlic is pretty small and we're cutting it into small pieces, so make sure you keep your fingers back and safe. So once our water is boiling, let's drop our asparagus in. We're going to cook it a couple of minutes until it's nice and tender. Now, once your pasta water is boiling, put your pasta in. Cook it to the instructions on the box. My box says about 8 minutes. So add your peas right before you take your asparagus off. It only takes a couple of seconds for frozen peas to cook. Drain your asparagus and peas and give them a good shake so they dry off pretty quickly. We want them pretty dry for the next step. So now we're going to add about a tablespoon of olive oil to a medium-sized saute pan. It should be enough to coat the bottom of the pan. Then we're going to let it sit on the heat and get nice and warm. Once the pan is warm, we're going to add in our minced garlic. We don't want this to cook too long. We want our garlic nice and toasted, not burned. If your garlic starts to get black and burn, it'll create a really bitter taste in your meal, and we don't want that. Fresh garlic is great in a lot of recipes. It gives good fresh flavor and is great for your heart and gut health. Then, once the garlic gets fragrant and toasted, we are going to add our dried asparagus and peas. Make sure you stir the peas and asparagus really well and coat it with the oil and garlic. You only need to saute the asparagus and peas for a minute or 2, just so it gets the nice garlicky flavor. This quick added step of sauteing the asparagus and peas in garlic is going to add a lot of flavor in the end. Once the pasta is finished cooking, strain it with a colander and then put it back in the warm pot on the stove. Turn the heat off and then carefully add your garlicky asparagus and peas to the pot with the pasta. At this point, we want to remove the pot from the heat. We don't want any of our asparagus, peas, or pasta to keep cooking. Once everything is in the same pot, give it a good stir so the oil from the saute pan starts to coat the pasta as well. Once off the heat, add in your oregano and basil and keep stirring. Today we are using whole wheat pasta. Whole wheat pasta is part of the whole grains group and is full of extra fiber. Now let's add our Parmesan cheese. Everything should still be warm from being on the heat for so long, so the Parmesan should have no trouble melting. Now, let's eat. you can put a serving of this in a bowl, and I like to add fresh cracked pepper to taste. If you have a little fresh basil or oregano, give that a fine mince and add that to the top as well. Look how great this dish looks and how easy it was to prepare. This dish is full of fiber and has a great spring vegetable, asparagus. Oh, and don't forget to add a fork. Enjoy!